Good morning. Welcome, everyone. I'm Rebecca Roberts. I am the curator of programming at Planet Word. We are a new museum of books and words and language at 13th and K in downtown DC. That's it in my Zoom background if you haven't had a chance to visit us yet. We are open Thursday through Sunday, 10 to 5, and we've got extra hours coming up for the holiday weeks. So if you've got kids out of school and don't know what to do with your time, come on down. We have more hours posted on our website. And if you ever see that the advance passes have already been reserved for the time you want to come, don't let that stop you because admission to the museum is free. A lot of those advance passes do have no-shows. So we always take walk-ups. So don't be discouraged. Come on down. We'll take your walk-ups and you can enjoy the museum. If you're not here in Washington and you found out about this program because you follow us on social media or you get our newsletter or our guests forwarded the invitation to you, thank you so much for supporting Planet Word. We are eager to have you come to as many programs as you can. Even after we start ramping up more in-person programs, we will be continuing to do these virtual programs because we've been able to reach so many people and get so many excellent guests. And with that, I think that is all the housekeeping I need to do. So let me introduce our guests, Stephanie Merry and Nora Krug. They're both editors at the Washington Post, which is our neighbor right on Franklin Square in downtown Washington. Although I will say all three of us are home right now. So pets and children, it could all happen. Stephanie and Nora, thank you so much for coming back and talking about books with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
So last year, when we talked about choosing the best books of 2020, we were, 9 months into this pandemic. You all identified a couple of reader habits that I then quoted for the rest of the year. So thank you for that. Sort of people who are really kind of leaning into learning more, or maybe just leaning into apocalyptic stories, people who were just escaping and diving into romance or science fiction and fantasy, people who were seeking comfort in rereading old classics, and then people who just couldn't read at all, who just didn't have the attention span or the desire. So now we're 1 year further on. How are we reading this year? What sort of trends are you seeing?
So as part of our Best Books special package, we actually put out a submission form to our readers to ask, well, first of all, what books did you love? But then also, what did your reading habits change at all? And it was very different than the year before. It was really interesting. One common trend was that a lot of people seemed a lot more likely to put down a book that didn't immediately grab them. I was talking about this with our office manager, Becky Malone, and she said, I wonder if it's the sort of like seize the day mentality because we are being confronted by our mortality kind of on a daily basis, or if it's the shrinking attention span that I think has been part of the pandemic. And I'm not a psychologist. I don't know the answer to that, but I will say that I've noticed the same thing. It's if a book isn't speaking to me right away, I'm like, life is too short. I'm ready for the next one. There were a lot of people who said that they had a very hard time reading at the beginning of the pandemic, but that in the last year, they've started to get back into it. One of the kind of gateway mediums, I guess you would say, is audiobooks. A lot of people talked about listening to audiobooks and having that kind of help them get back into reading physical copies as well. And those were some of the big takeaways. The other thing I will say is that while last year, a lot of people were picking up books about race to understand the racial reckoning that was happening in the country, I saw a lot more responses this year that were sort of like, I need something with a happy ending. I need something hopeful. I need there's already so much going on in the world. And I don't think it's like people just putting their heads in the sand. I think that they are reading the news. And that's why when they're ready to do other kinds of reading, that they need something a little more comforting. I think, on top of the racial reckoning that happened in the last year, all of the climate news is really difficult, things happening politically, culture wars. There's just a lot of like combustible stuff going on. And I think that people were really seeking solace from books more this year.
It's so interesting. Nora, were you a stop reading in the middle of a book person? Have you ever been one of those, or do you read?
I confess, yes, I've always been that kind of person. So, but that is often why I sometimes will take up like an essay collection or short stories. And there were two that I really enjoyed this, actually three this year, which sort of like allows you to sort of dip in and out a little bit more than a novel that you can get committed to. So, and I agree. I mean, I was looking before we started at, the best-selling books of 2021. And it's really, a combination of a lot of kind of, shall I say, explosive political type books about like the pandemic, about particular political figures. And then a lot of comforting books like The Boy, the Horse, the Fox, the Mole. I forget which animals, what order they go in, but that book has been on there for quite some time. And then there's like Stanley Tucci's book about taste that's been up there for a while. And then, Paul McCartney. I mean, you can, and there's like two Beatles books. So maybe there's a certain nostalgia, and Midnight Library continues to be very popular. I just thought it was interesting to see that combination of like kind of explosive, like I'm just going to get right into this difficult stuff, or I just want comfort.
Yeah. And what about from the writing side of things? What trends are you seeing in terms of new books coming out?
Well, we have our first batch of COVID books. So that's kind of interesting to see. Gary Steingart's book this year, Our Country Friends, takes place in upstate New York, and it's a bunch of New Yorkers and other city people who congregate in a rural area to kind of weather the pandemic among themselves. And that's, I was interested to see, like, is that going to do well, or are people going to say, I need an escape from the pandemic? But it's done well so far. One of our top thrillers of the year too was called 56 Days, and it is also a pandemic story about two people who meet. I think they meet online. I haven't read it yet, but I think they meet online. And they start to hang out, but they both have very explosive secrets. So it's interesting to see, how that's going and whether people are responding to those kinds of stories. And it seems like they are.
Yeah. Is this, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't The Sentence, that Louise Erdrich book, is that,
Yes.
That's a pandemic book that's also been very well received. And there's a lot of children's books that are explanatory books about COVID to help kids deal with it. Yeah, that it's interesting to see, because I think with novels about it is a lot more processed, the experience, than some of the books that came out last year were more just sort of like more like instant poetry type of books. And these are a little bit, I mean, if you're going to have a book, I think Louise Penny's, not the one she wrote with Hillary Clinton, but the other one, The Madness.
Yeah.
I think that also has a pandemic.
It does. Yeah. It's funny. I mean, I think that there are, it's still to be seen how people treat this as sort of a plot point, of modern life, right? I think that especially books that rely on like cross misreadings or misunderstanding, a lot of sort of romance books, things like that, pretend we don't have cell phones, because a lot of those plot points would just be solved by a simple text message. And I wonder if, so a lot of them are set in the early 90s just to get around to the technology issues of the plot. And I wonder if going forward, whether fiction writers are just going to sort of skip on over the fact that the last couple of years have been anomalous. With any luck, they're anomalous. Or whether, it'll be a plot point and it was a flourishing romance, and now we couldn't see each other because we were all locked down.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. One of the other things that we noticed, especially among thrillers, was this idea of who gets to tell what story and appropriating stories, which I thought was really interesting. We had a couple on our list, including The Plot, that was about a novelist stealing someone else's story and the ramifications of that. And I think that's a really big discussion that's happening culturally, and we'll probably be seeing a lot more of that. I also think there is, a tendency to revisit the past, both in historical books and in historical fiction, and reconsider who the major players are, right? So it's like, well, no one was talking about what women were doing during World War II, so let's talk about all the contributions they've made. And I think it's sort of like that, that hidden figures sort of like kicked off this reassessment of who deserves their story to be told, which is actually kind of also tied into the, the story appropriation and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's dig into the list. I do have a couple of slides of the best of the best. So of the 10 best of 2021, according to the Washington Post, you guys, there are 5 fiction, 5 nonfiction. These are the fiction. So I have only read Matrix on this list. Tell me a little bit about some of these books and why they made the list.
So I'll talk about sort of the big overarching picture, and then hand it over to Nora, because I know she's read Crossroads, which I haven't.
I'll just say,
but
it was really hard to come up with this list. So that's all.
Why was it so hard?
Too many books that are great.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Steph. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's true. We also do a list of 50 notable fiction and 50 notable nonfiction, and even that is hard. So narrowing it down to 10 total, and we tried to split it up, fiction and nonfiction, 5 and 5, is just impossible. And it's definitely more art than science. We're looking at it both on an individual level, making sure that each of these books rises to a certain level in terms of its storytelling and the themes, but also looking at it as a whole to make sure that it's eclectic enough and that it will serve various types of readers. I think some of these were a no-brainer. I think Matrix, there's no question. I mean, Lauren Groff can make a medieval nuns story must-read fiction, which is, only Lauren Groff can do that.
Right.
But then there are other books like Gold Diggers. I don't think that is necessarily like a household name for a lot of people. I think it might be at some point because Mindy Kaling bought the rights, and I think she's planning a series for it. But it's a book that really speaks to the realities of the immigrant experience. And I think that a lot of these books speak to our current realities, and that's what makes them so perfect for this year. Like Claire in the Sun deals with, AI and robots, which I think is something that a lot of us are thinking about. The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, which was just a really ambitious debut novel from this celebrated poet. It thinks about the legacy of racism and what it means. I think that these are all conversations that we're really having in this moment, which is why it made sense for these books to make the 2021 list. But I'm sure Nora has other thoughts too.
Yeah, because you left me with Crossroads, which I have here in my. That's not a any book by Jonathan Franzen will. I think the level at which he's writing is hard to match at this point. And, I am a fan of all of his books, despite myself, maybe sometimes, and this is something, that you can read a few pages every night if you can't spend an entire week, because it's very, very long, very heavy to carry. But, it just does, what he does so well, like a dysfunctional family saga. And, the writing is at such a level that you're just sort of savoring all the sentences and thinking about them a lot after you put the book down. So I think it's certainly, it might have to take until 2022 to finish it, but it's definitely the best book of 2021.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I've only read Matrix, but I think that what I know about these other titles, they share this sort of bold imagination. Gold Diggers, the premise is that Indian American students are actually using alchemy to improve their academic standing. Matrix is set in this very surprising place, this in a medieval abbey with this sort of proto-feminist hero. Clara and the Sun delves into what is human and what is intelligence. And I've only heard great, but brace yourself things about the love songs about W.E.B. Du Bois because it is, as I understand, pretty big and pretty ambitious.
Both Crossroads and Love Songs are like 700 pages. So
Yeah.
that's an
And then there's
investment.
Cloud Cuckoo Land, which is also doing really well. And that is a project, that book.
This is the one that I'm glad you brought that up because this is the one thing that people are like, how could you not include this on your list? And we didn't include this on this list, and we didn't include it on our 50 fiction list because Ron Charles, our fiction critic, really didn't like it, And so at the end of the day, we trust his views, but also we really love having lists be different from publication to publication. I mean, I think that that's what makes them interesting. Like I'm proud that we have Gold Diggers on our list because it might be surprising and it might not have found, certain readers unless we put it on there. On our fiction, our 50 list, we have a story collection called Rights by Savannah Johnston, who's a Native writer writing about Native realities. And I haven't seen that on other lists. It's a small publisher, but we gave it this amazing review and it's a beautifully written book. And so I think that that's what makes all of these lists interesting is that they aren't all the same.
Yeah, and it's also, a point of just, debate and discussion when you kind of, put all the different lists you see together and see, which ones, it's a point of debate and discussion in itself, as we're doing here. And that makes it interesting.
Well, let's look at the nonfiction list. Again, some that have been hitting the bestseller list, like Empire of Pain. Some that, tried and true journalists like Elizabeth Kolbert, but some that are not on others' lists. Tell me about the nonfiction list.
Nora, do you want to start?
Well, I think, Empire of Pain is sort of everything this year. I mean, it also has had not only just been a bestseller and a great read, but had like an actual, effect in the world.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of
and I should say, I didn't include any of the subtitles because it would have made the slide
that's okay
and hard to read. But Empire of Pain is about the Sackler dynasty and the opium.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not. And yeah, I mean, it's just, it had an effect in the world too. And, for that reason, it's sort of, it almost hits it's a great read, it's an important subject, and it had an effect on life. So that was certainly an obvious one. And also Afghanistan Papers is by our own reporter. And it also had, an effect and became extremely relevant this year. And so we felt an important one to include. And I'm going to leave the other. I took the hardcore. So Steph, you can. Got a lot of memoirs too.
Right. I mean, I think that it's the same thing. Like we want it to be somewhat eclectic. I'm fairly hesitant. I think we all are a little hesitant about including Washington Post writers in our top 10, but Afghanistan Papers was just so important and it gave such a better understanding of what was happening in the world and how we got to this crazy place. And then the other one, Somebody's Daughter, is a memoir by Ashley Ford. And it's a really like complicated story of human existence. Like she grew up without her father, who was incarcerated. He was found guilty of sexual assault. And then as she's an adult, he is released from prison. But then in the intervening years, she's also been a victim of sexual assault. And it's like, rediscovering this relationship, and is this a relationship she wants, and kind of trying to understand her past and the pain she's been through. And it's really beautifully told. And then we have Under a White Sky by Elizabeth Colbert, who is writing one, like she does so beautifully, about the climate catastrophe that is happening. And this is a really interesting take, which is it's about all of the ways that we've tried to fix the damage that we've already done, and then in that way sometimes inflicted even more damage on the environment. I don't think it's entirely hopeless, but it is a really interesting look at the human impact on the world. And I think it's a really important thing for us all to be reading right now. I mean, I know a lot of the responses we've gotten from our readers this year has been like, no, I don't want to read this right now. But I do think it is an important thing for us to be confronting. And then All That She Carried is a really interesting book. Tia Miles is a Harvard historian, and she took basically this artifact. It was a sack, a cloth sack, that was given from an enslaved woman to her daughter who was about to be sold, which is just obviously a heart-wrenching reality to consider. But the book is about much more than that, because Miles was trying to trace what happened, how that sack was passed from one generation to the next, and where it ended up, and what the objects within it, why those were important. And then in doing that, because so much has been left out of the historical record, she's also really interrogating the benefits of the historical record, of who's telling what story. Again, we're back to this same theme, but it's like, enslaved people, their stories they're not necessarily written in the historical record because of who has been telling those stories. And so I think that it's really an important book in that sense. I mean, we're seeing a lot of kind of reassessments of history. I mean, you see the 1609 Project, which came out as a book this year, and how it was such a lightning rod, because it really reassessed what generations of school children have taken as fact. And so this is sort of in that vein, but it moves in a slightly different direction.
I think Clint Smith's book, The Word Is Past, is also
Mhm.
that vein. We have him coming to Planet Word, by the way. Anyone who wants to see Clint Smith, talking about how people are talking about slavery in several different contexts.
Mhm.
So what's not on this list is the book everyone gives their father-in-law every Christmas, the big American biography by Ron Chernow or John Meacham or one of the usual suspects, right? And is that kind of part of reassessing how we're telling history, that it's not this sort of Hall of Fame model as much anymore?
Well, we do have at least one of those books on the rest of the list. I don't know that was necessarily our thinking, but I think given what is out there right now and what the cultural experience is, we thought that this list sort of more reflected this particular moment, although I don't think we planned it in the terms that as you just well put it, but I think that this list more reflects 2021 than having I don't know, that does John Meacham have a book this year? I think the Code
He's still working
Breakers.
on James Madison. And I must say, I love those books. Like nothing against them. I always learn something. They're always incredibly well researched. They always delve into sources of American history that I haven't seen before. So I'm not being dismissive. It's become sort of like this truism that books like that do well this time of year because everyone's got someone on their list that they want to buy it for.
Yeah, no, it's true. It wasn't like a conscious decision to leave something like that off, but yeah, I mean, these just sort of became more important in a way in terms of the current discussions that are happening.
So going away from the pure top 10, and I should and Dara will put the link in the chat, the larger 50 notable books, 50 fiction, 50 nonfiction, are available on the Washington Post website. We're not going to go through all 50 of them, but you do break it up by genre a little bit. And so I want to delve into the mystery and thriller, because in the kind of wrap it all up in a nice bow at the end, plot point, I like this list a lot. It's not a genre I read a ton of, although I have read The Plot, which is a little bit of a genre crossing book. So thriller and mystery, are there overall trends you're seeing on this list at all?
Well, I think Steph, as Steph pointed out, there was a theme of this stealing somebody's idea was a big. It's both in A Lonely Man and The Plot. That is the plot point in both of those books. And then there were at least two others, and the other two did not make this list. But if not to plug ourselves, but if you Google Maureen Corrigan and the Washington Post, she mentioned it in all of the reviews that she wrote of those books. So there was a theme there. And, again, this was also a list that was very, very hard to cut down. But we do have two excellent critics in Maureen and Dick Lipez, who, are the main people who review our thrillers and mysteries. And they were the ones who sort of came up with a much longer list that then we worked down, we cut down. I mean, I think A Line to Kill is more of a fun book. It's a little bit of a wink, wink.
He's a very imaginative writer.
Yeah, like it's a lot more, it's a lot of fun. The plot, is also, fun. Razorblade Tears is pretty violent. Silverview, John le Carre's, last book that was found. That's one, maybe for your father-in-law. And,
you're so right.
And, this Clark and Division, it was also sort of an unusual book for this list. I don't think a lot of other people had that on there, as sort of unusual story about the aftermath of Japanese internment. And then 56 Days, that's the pandemic book, I believe. Yeah, yes. I've read so many. So, it's got a variety. I think, I will confess that sometimes we do get complaints because a lot of these are fairly serious thrillers. And we don't have Colleen Hoover on here. And we don't have, I can't remember now the name. There's another book that's been on the bestseller list all year, a thriller.
Apples Never Fall, that one.
I think that's on our other list, but no, there's another book that I'm blanking on. We don't really have any of those on here, and that's something that we do think about. But I think we wanted to get, again, a lot of variety, different voices, different kinds of stories, thrillers, mysteries. It's a broad subject, even though it all has to do with somebody dying and figuring out how it happened.
Yeah, and we didn't include either Hillary or Bill's thrillers.
That's true, we didn't.
On this list. Although, both of those did pretty well, but
right.
But yeah, they didn't kind of rise to the level.
We couldn't. Again, the cutting room floor was littered with good books yet again, unfortunately. But I think I'm pretty excited about this list, which I, of course, have shared with my father.
And, I think this is a genre that is so broad because it does encompass the sort of spycraft and the cozy fireside mystery
Exactly.
between, that you could definitely do lists of every subgenre within this and cover really good books.
And then you have also the series, the really, that are just these prolific authors who have these really extensive series. And, we want these to be books that people can kind of dip into, even if they don't have a history with a series. And so we tend to, shy away from those. I think last year we probably put Louise Penny's on just because people were just insanely excited about it.
Yeah.
She has the Inspector Gamache series. And I think, we had heard from some people that it felt like it was getting a little repetitive. But then last year she came out with this new book and everyone was like, oh, this is amazing. So,
Right.
So yeah.
Oh, yeah. Also, I mean, I think Michael Connelly's got at least 2 books on the bestseller list right now. And, we gave the book a good review, but again, it was, we kind of wanted to mix it up a little bit and figure that people are going to find Michael Connelly no matter what. And he's just, I mean, he's just sort of a steady, great, the master of the police procedural. But, yeah, there's just so many, that we couldn't include.
Yeah. So as someone who has only read one of these 10 and who has some vacation coming up, which one should I download onto my Kindle?
One.
2.
You've read the plot, you said.
I've read the plot.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, I like A Line to Kill, but that's, just because I'm looking for something to make me laugh a little bit, a little like more of a witty kind of book. I mean, I also really want to read Silverview, just because I really like John le Carre. Those would be my choices, but I don't know, Steph, you might have some other, but all of them.
I liked Razorblade Tears. It was quite dark. But, and I had, Nora and I haven't read all of these since these were picks from our critics, but 56 Days and Clark and Division are definitely on my nightstand pile, because those they've gotten great reviews and they're really interesting and different. And I am interested to see how COVID plays a role and the pandemic plays a role in literature and if it's working.
Also, if you wanted to compare the Chris Power book and the plot have some shared plot points unintentionally. And I think A Lonely Man didn't get as much coverage as obviously as the plot for obvious reasons. And so I don't know, you might want to we've now just basically recommended the entire list for you.
Yeah, thank you for that. No.
I hope you have some time.
The other list I want to dig into a little bit is the audiobooks list. You mentioned, Stephanie, that people are listening to books a lot, and I'm a huge audiobook fan. I say that in a lot of different Planet Word programs. And when I talk to other people who listen to a lot of books, I find that we kind of fall into 2 broad categories. One is people like me who choose like big, sweeping, multi-generational epics to listen to because it feels like you can really get involved in the performance and you're suddenly transported to 14th century England or wherever you are. I listen to Cloud Cuckoo Land rather than read that big old thing. Then I know some people actually prefer to listen to nonfiction because it sort of focuses their attention on the topic in a way that reading through heavily footnoted prose doesn't. So I'm curious to hear what our audience here feels about audiobooks and what sorts of things they listen to as opposed to read. But here is your audiobooks list. And a bit about, first of all, the criteria for what you think makes a good audiobook versus a read book.
Well, not to plug ourselves, but Steph and I had we did a little online conversation about this, and we discussed, and we sort of had opposing views on, I think what we like, I sort of like performance, and I'm looking at this list and thinking which one would be the most, definitely not Empire of Pain, but I'm trying to think about this list is also put together by our critic, Catherine Powers, who has a very particular point of view, but like The Man Who Died Twice is a lot of fun. If you're looking for fun. Do you want to talk about what you like to listen to this year, Steph?
So as Nora said, this was our audiobook critics list, which I think is different from Nora and my list, our personal list. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of these make sense. I mean, something like Love Songs, because it is whatever, 700 words is probably like 30 hours or something. That's how I tend to listen to audiobooks. I mean, not always, but I do often choose really long books. I did The Overstory this year by audiobook because, yeah, it's just, it's heavy. It's big, and I could just, chip away at it when I was walking the dog or doing laundry or whatever. I also like to listen to some nonfiction. Empire of Pain was really great. Patrick Radden Keefe reads it, and I don't often feel that authors are the best people to be reading their books, but he does an excellent job. In thinking about our audiobooks coverage, I've been talking to a fair number of audiobooks publicists, and they say that, while there are certain genres that do really well, thrillers being one, that nonfiction is really popular, especially in the self-help realm, which isn't something that we cover very extensively. But I did think that was really interesting. I'm not sure why that is, but
I could see that.
What they say, the jargon is they say it over indexes, so it does particularly well as an audiobook format, and it has a longer tail as an audiobook than it does as a print book, which I found really interesting too.
Yeah, I could see that, going out for a walk to clear your head, and maybe not wanting to, delve into American history, but just to listen to somebody telling you how you can be a better person, or feel better about things. I mean, I listen to audiobooks mostly in the car when I'm either with my family or driving to pick up my family. I switch them depending on who's in the car. So I generally try to pick books that we can all listen to. Although when I'm, by myself, I might listen, for example, to David Sedaris or something, just for something fun, and, because of the distinctiveness of the voice. And to me, he's sort of a performer as opposed to a writer. And I mean, a good writer too, but I mean, the experience of him is better heard than read.
Well, it's such a distinctive voice too.
Exactly. So yeah, like Carnival of Snackery is like a really fun book to listen to. Just, it's like a lot cheaper than trying to buy tickets to see him perform. So that would be sort of my, sort of fun pick. And we just actually posted a story about celebrity authors reading their own books. Like Mel Brooks has a book that just came out, and he reads it, which is certainly distinctive, which I think would be a lot of fun to listen to, but maybe not with my kids. Though I may try Will Smith's book is out now, and my son is
Does he read it?
He does read it. And my son is a big fan of Will Smith, so I think we might try that one in the car. Although I have a feeling there might be some language issues, but I'll just, I think as a teenager, it'll be fine. But I'm definitely interested in those two books for my car.
And Nora, was your top book of the audiobook of the year Matrix? Is that right? Or was there another book that you felt like?
I liked Matrix, yeah. I mean, that's very different from Carnival of Snackery, but yeah, I loved the narration. It was a beautiful voice, and so.
Yeah, my top audiobook of the year, which is not on our critics list, was The Lincoln Highway.
Uh-huh.
I listened to that too. That was great on audio.
I thought it was better on audio than if I had read the print version, because Eduardo Ballerini's, he does the majority of the narration, and his voice is just amazing. And the way that he changes from one character to the next, for those who haven't read it, it takes place in the early 50s, and it's about this, I don't know, maybe he's an 18-year-old boy who gets out of a juvenile detention center after accidentally killing someone, and he has to take over care of his younger brother, and they're gonna drive to San Francisco to try to track down their mom, but instead they get waylaid by these two other juvenile delinquents who are just these really entertaining characters. And I just loved the way that the narration made this one character, Duchess, who is just, I mean, he's a criminal and he's dangerous, but the way the narration was just made him this complicated, lovable, eccentric that I just I just found myself walking around, walking the dog with like this big smile on my face because it was just, the delivery was amazing, I thought.
Yeah, Lincoln Highway by Amor Towles, who wrote A Gentleman in Moscow, which, continues to be on everybody's lists. And it's very different in feel, but a totally delightful, charming book.
Mhm.
The other trend I really have sort of leaned into is famous actors and actresses rereading classics, which doesn't always work. Although I listened to Tandy Newton narrate Jane Eyre this year,
Oh,
and
wow.
oh my goodness, she just read the hell out of that book. I mean, I reread Jane Eyre every 5 or 6 years. It's one of those touchstone books for me, and it felt like a whole new experience.
Wow.
It's so, so, so good. Highly recommend.
Great.
Jake Gyllenhaal's Great Gatsby is pretty good too. But
Ooh, those sound
you're a
great.
good actor, doesn't mean you're a great
I
narrator.
haven't dipped into that yet, but I'm gonna have to now.
I know,
That
that's
sounds
a
really
great, thank you for the idea.
I mean, there's so many new books that rereading books feels a little bit like, really, how many times have I read Jane Eyre? But it's pretty great.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can sort of talk. We've got a couple of questions. So somebody is asking about Hell of a Book. Sarah says, we're listening to Hell of a Book, which is a wonderful read. It won the National Book Award, but I don't see it on any of your lists. What do you think of it?
Yeah, we didn't have it on our top 10, but it was on our
Yeah.
50 list for fiction. We had a very positive review of it. I haven't personally read it. Did you read it, Nora?
I didn't read it, but it's definitely on it was definitely part of the discussion of getting, it was a top 10 contender. But it's just so hard when you only have five fiction books that you can pick. But we definitely wanted to make sure that it was on the longer list, so it is there.
Jason Mott, the author, also has a really interesting backstory. I don't know if we can link to this. We had a story about him, how he was, he was like working at a call center or something, and he sent his first novel. This is his second novel, I believe. He sent his first novel out to just a ton of different publishers, and just it randomly got, after many rejections, it randomly got picked off of the slush pile. And then now here he is with a national book.
Hell of a book.
It's with a hell of a book. And it sounds like a really interesting book too. It's about a Black author who goes on book tour and starts getting visits from an imaginary friend. But it's kind of, there are other threads that are interwoven. So it's an ambitious book with some interesting themes.
And let me just remind our audience, if you have other books you want to ask about or recommend, please use the chat or the Q&A, and we will keep an eye on them. So we haven't talked sort of about the book industry as a whole. I know that there were some supply chain issues, and we kept hearing that there was a paper shortage, and there were all sorts of things that might have impacted the publishing schedule. I think publishers like to time things so that they'll do as well as possible when they debut. What sort of trends are you seeing in publishing that you might be able to pinpoint for our readers?
Nora, do you want to start, or do you want me to?
Well, I guess, yeah, in terms of the supply chain, I personally ordered all of my books like in October to make sure that I would get them in time for the holidays. And I did receive them. So I do think, and I did notice also, I think, because of the continued pandemic issues, I did see a number of books that were pushed ahead in the hopes that things would clear up, because I think a lot of authors, really want to be able to do events, not just because they sell books, but because they really want to connect with readers in a more personal way. And I know a lot of authors have really been trying hard to do that. And I think that was a big reason, I think, that a lot of publishers pushed things ahead, so that we might be at a time where we could be more in person with people and have like books signed and maybe even shake hands again. And that was something that, you know, I personally am really would love to see again, because I really enjoy going to events and meeting authors and seeing them. And I just find that whole experience of being live with an author is incredible. And I hope we can get to that soon. But I don't know, what other issues you want to?
Yeah. So I think that there were so many, at the start of the pandemic, there were so many books that pushed to first to the fall of 2020 and then to 2021 that, you know, by the time 2021 rolled around and it was unclear when this would all end, that, you know, a lot of books just ended up, okay, this is their release date. This is when it's going to release, which I think was really probably difficult for some of the smaller books because there were just so many big books by big authors that seemed to all land right at the same time. And that's a perennial problem, but I do think it was exacerbated by the pandemic. This fall was just, it was hard for us in terms of assigning reviews because there were so many major novels that came out. And you don't want things to slip through the cracks, but they always do, you know? So I think that was an issue I'm seeing, especially from, you know, small publishers that they said a book was going to come out in December, but then for whatever reason, there was one by Siglio Press that was supposed to come out in November. And I said, you know, is this coming out in November? And they said, technically, yes, but since we don't have the paper or we don't have the books, you know, let's say December. It's like people had to be flexible. And I'm sure it was hurting businesses and especially the smaller businesses, you know, which was really, really difficult.
Yeah. And, you know, Nora, that point about in-person book events, we're so spoiled here in Washington with so many great independent bookstores, all of whom have like a speaker a night in normal times. I think Politics and Prose has like 3 speakers a night when they're really going full bore. It's something I pay attention to in terms of bringing authors to Planet Word because we don't want to compete with the local independent bookstores. And so we try to concentrate on books that really delve into, you know, words and language in a specific way because you can go hear an author every night. And
Right.
it's lovely that now we can go listen to a book event from a bookstore in, you know, San Diego, but it really is a different energy and a different relation with the author for sure.
I do think there was some fatigue too with the online events. You know, it's like now you can find those online events on the internet all over the place. And how many different questions can one author possibly receive? And so you're right. If it's like, if that energy, that sort of like collective energy isn't there, I think it's a harder sell.
Maybe next year we'll be able to do this one live.
That would be so great.
I won't have to clean my room.
So in terms of next year, because you all get galleys and you see the list that publishers have coming up, are you identifying anything coming up on the pike that we should be paying attention to? Either books or trends or overall?
Well, I know I'm very excited because Dani Shapiro and Emma Straub both have novels, and I am fans of both of them. And so I'm definitely looking forward to that, although I think they're farther off. They're in the summer, I believe, or even the fall. And I'm trying to think. Emily, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say Emily St. John Mandel has a new book too, which I am really, really excited. I'm also, tonight is the first episode of Station 11 on HBO Max. I can't wait to see what they do with that. I'm a big fan of her writing. There are a lot of big books coming out. I'm sort of drawing a blank. For some reason, the only thing I can think of is the collaboration between Dolly Parton and James Patterson.
Oh yeah,
that's a thing.
Yes.
Wow.
And it has an album too, I think, right?
I should hope so.
Music? That would be an audiobook, maybe for you.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I mean, I listened to the Hillary Clinton Louise Penny book, I have to say. It was fun. It was, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I was at a meet. I think Ruth Ware has, if you're looking for a mystery, I think she's got a summer book coming if you're a fan, which a lot of people are. Yeah, those are the ones that really stuck out, like that I'm definitely going to read personally. Um,
Oh, Marlon James.
Yep.
You know, he won the Booker Prize, right? For this is another one of those books where I can never remember the order. It's like Red Leopard, you know. But yeah, he has a book coming out, which should be, I'm sure will do very well. Can you think of any others, Maura?
well, we have a very long list that we're putting together right now. This is actually after we get off the phone, Steph and I will be meeting, talking about like what we're assigning for next year. But those are some of the ones. I think Elena Ferrante has an essay collection, not a novel. But maybe, you know, personally, I like to read everything that she has, because maybe we'll figure out who she is or he is. So I'm looking forward to that also.
Yeah, we didn't really sort of follow up on that trend of short stories and essays as a way to
Oh,
sort of match up on, you know, limited attention span.
oh, well, I mean, I love Ann Patchett's.
I will read anything Ann Patchett writes.
Yeah, I really love her essays. And this year she had so many of them in the New Yorker and elsewhere, and I just ate them up. And I love that. I forget, These Precious Days, I think is the book. And then Lily King has a story collection also this year,
Oh, right.
which I think came out after our list, or otherwise would have made our list. It just unfortunately was published like in late November. And then Hilma Wolitzer, also, who's Meg Wolitzer's mother, has a short story collection that came out this summer. It's something like Crying in H Mart, but it's called like the woman who went mad in a supermarket or something like that. And it's really, really, really good. It collects all of her older works and then a new story that's very, very moving about her personal experience with COVID, actually, which I would recommend also.
Yeah, I have the Lily King collection on my list because I really liked writers.
Yeah, me too.
An audience member says, "What did you think about Black Buck?"
Yeah, so that was Matteo Escaripor's novel that came out in January. So it came out, feels like a million years ago. I did not read this one, but Ron, our fiction critic, loved it. I mean, it was on our summer list. So, you know, standout books to read over the summer. And it was just apparently amazing. It was a corporate satire about a Black man who's working in Starbucks, but then ends up getting picked to work in this startup. And, you know, it's got all of the silly jargon of startup life, but also the veiled racism that is happening. And the main character has to decide what they're willing to put up with in order to succeed. And yeah, it got great reviews. So another great recommendation. I'm pretty sure that was on our 50 list.
It was, yeah.
So we are almost out of time. I'm going to ask you each sort of how you read. Are you Kindle versus paper? Are you a little bit at a time before you fall asleep, or set aside a time and really delve in? What kind of readers are you?
You want to start, Nora?
I can start. I mean, I have a busy life.
You read as a job.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
You read as a job. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say, I mean, I only read in paper. And I do audiobooks and paper just because I'm on the screen reading all day, and I just don't really enjoy reading a book on a Kindle. Although, I mean, I have, and there have been a few times when I've really enjoyed it. It was certainly when I'm traveling, I read on a Kindle, certainly. And I've had some good experiences, but I'm definitely like a evening reader. It's the only time I really have, or an early morning reader. And yeah, I really love having books. I don't know that my husband, who's very neat, likes me having books. I think my neighbors love me having books, because when I'm finished with them, I often will put them in a little free library. And so I have a very popular little free library, and there's a few people that I tell when I'm going, or they see me walking down the street with my bag and they're like, "Are you going to the little free library?" So I definitely love reading in print. I love keeping books, having books. I love book covers. I'm into fonts, like so I really I guess am old fashioned in that way, except when I travel. But anyway, that's mine.
Yeah. I usually have a few audiobooks that I'm juggling, and I listen to them all the time. You know, it's like I'm making lunch, I'm listening to my audiobook, I'm taking the dog for a walk, I'm doing the laundry. You know, what I hear from a lot of people is like, it's a way to bribe yourself to do the chores that you would otherwise put off.
100%.
Yeah, but like Nora, I have a very busy life. I have a 3-year-old, and so there's not as much time for reading as I would like. But it is like my evening ritual. You know, it's like he goes to bed and I start reading, and I almost always am reading these days on a Kindle, just because we tend to get ARCs. Those are advanced reader copies through NetGalley, which is increasingly popular with the pandemic. Rather than sending out all of these books, they send out a lot of e-galleys. And so I tend to read them on a screen, even though I do prefer, you know, the weight and the feel of having a book in my hand.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us again this year. I do hope we could be in person next year. That would be fantastic.
Would be.
I'll have to put on shoes.
Right, right.
It's worth it. It's worth it.
I won't tell. And thank you for all the great recommendations. I'm looking forward to digging into these lists a little bit more. And thank you, Dara, back there in the chat, for posting links to everything. And thank you, audience, for your continued support of Planet Word. Thank you all.
Happy reading.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.